Thank you for coming along tonight. I've often said to people, if people will listen, I'll talk about Bethlehem University. So I'm trying to keep it probably between 3 and 4 hours tonight. So it's just to keep it reasonable. Yeah. But one of the things we are seeking to do is to keep hope alive at Bethlehem University, and therefore that's why I thank you for coming. When I look at our students, I think one of the real challenges is to keep hope alive, because when the Palestinians look back over the last 60 or so years, there's very little that leads them to be optimistic. So I think that hope is something different from being optimistic. And as I've wrestled with this, one of the things I've come to is a realization that it's to do with people in Palestine realizing that there are people outside who understand them and who are standing in solidarity with them. It's very easy for our students, for example, to get the impression that they are the problem. They're the reason there's so much hassle in that part of the world, and that nobody really wants to have anything to do with them. So when people come to visit us, and we last year probably had between 3,000 and 4,000 pilgrims came to visit us, including some that you brought. If I get the chance, I thank them for coming, because what it does is to show our students that that impression that they may have picked up is wrong, that there are people who are concerned about them, who are standing in solidarity with them. And so when I can go back after next week and tell people about this gathering in Sydney, and that's going to be of value to them as well. To know that there are people here in Sydney who are concerned about them, who are standing in solidarity with them. So again, I thank you for being here. There are 3 things I'd like to do tonight. Firstly, to send some context in which we are operating. Hello. Now, some I know have listened to me before, so part of that might be a repeat of some of the things I've already done. Then I'd like to look at some of the challenges we face at Bethlehem University, and then the response that we are making as a Catholic university, as an educational institute. One of the things I find, particularly when I talk in the States and gather with people there, there's often an equation made between Palestinians and terrorists. So if I talk about Palestinians, I'm obviously talking about terrorists. So these are some of the terrorists I'm dealing with day in and day out. Ordinary young people wanting an education. Okay? And it's these people that I want to talk about tonight. I'm presuming that you know where Israel-Palestine is, at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, a very small country. In comparison to Australia, it's this little blue thing in Victoria. In comparison, it's a little over 10,000 square miles. Tasmania is 26,000 square miles, so it's about a little under half of the size of Tasmania. So it's a very small part. My pointer won't work here, but I'd ask you to keep in mind the yellow part, which is the West Bank. This is where Bethlehem is, and that's where I live. Because I want to come back and talk about that in a few minutes. If you go back prior to 1946, the Palestinians had 90% of the land that is Israel-Palestine now. And then without any consultation with them whatsoever, the United Nations divided that, and Palestine, under that arrangement, was to have 43% of it. And then in 1948, when the Nakba, the invasion by Israel, Palestinians ended up with 22%. And that lasted through until 1967, where you had the war of the invasion of the West Bank. And after that, there was around 11%. Now this is a 2008 map, So it's, with the expansion of the settlements, it's much less than 10%. And sometimes I'll ask, why are the Palestinians upset? You know, you take a look at what has happened since 1946, and you get a sense of why they might be upset at what has been happening to them. There are many restrictions as a result of the occupation of 1967, and I'm just wanting to look at the restrictions that impact on Bethlehem University students, and the significant ones are around movement. The restrictions that prevent them from moving and limit them. The first ones are the checkpoints, the ones that are manned 24 hours of the day, and then there's only partial checkpoints. Remember how small this is, and this is where the checkpoints are through the West Bank. Now the reason the Israelis have checkpoints in Palestine is that it enables them to close down areas. Like, I can't remember, I think it was in March or April last year, there was an incident in Ramallah, and every road out of Ramallah has a checkpoint on it, so they just closed all the checkpoints, which meant nobody could get in and nobody could get out. So these are checkpoints right through.
I go visit my parents in Ramallah, that it's a city that, if it wasn't for the wall, it would be half an hour away, but because of the wall and the 2 checkpoints that I have to cross, it takes me around an hour and a half. Well, going through the checkpoint is very tough because you never know what's awaiting you. Sometimes they can stop you, they can just ask for an ID, sometimes they can scream at you or make you wait for maybe half an hour, or they can simply shut the checkpoint and you have to go back home.
This is one of our students from Ramallah, or his parents live in Ramallah, and he has a place in Bethlehem where he lives. Just while I think of it, Yosef is, his father is a Palestinian, his mother is from Chile, and he grew up in Chile, and he was 16 when his father was desperate to come back. So they came back when he was 16 on a 3-month visa, and then they stayed. And so they're overstayers in Palestine, and the implications of that are that he doesn't have any papers. He doesn't have his Palestinian ID. So if he stopped at the checkpoint and the Israelis find that he hasn't any papers, he would be deported. So any time he goes back to Ramallah, he has to go through 2 checkpoints. I don't know what he does, and I'm not going to ask him, but so far he hasn't been caught. Then there are the trenches, which troughs dug across the road, and this is where they are, not as many, but when you put the trenches with the checkpoints, this is the pattern of restrictions you get. And then there are the gates that are able to be closed and close off a road, and this is where they are. And then when you put those with the trenches and the checkpoints, you get this pattern. And then there are roadblocks, just concrete cubes that are put on the road to prevent people from using it, and this is where they are. And when you put those with all of the other things, this is the pattern you get there. And in addition to that, there are the earth mount and earth walls, and you can see over the top of the earth mount the cars that these women have to climb over, or the earth mount is what they have to climb over to get to their cars. And this is where they are. And you put all the other things together with that, and that's the pattern you get of restrictions. And then there are the Israeli-only roads. This is a road, you can see the settlement up on the hill there. This is an Israeli-only road that goes to that. You have to have a yellow-plated yellow number plate on your car in order to be able to drive on that. The Palestinians have green number plates, so they're not allowed on there at all. And then there are fences along the side of the road that prevent people walking across them. This is an olive grove here. When this road was put through, possibly there was an olive grove right across. People who have this olive grove now can't get to the other side. And in addition to that, there's the wall, which is snaking its way around Jerusalem and now past Bethlehem, and it's moving into the Kremazon Valley. This just gives you a sense of the size of it. It's twice as high as the Berlin Wall. You can see these children here, and you can see the height of the wall next to them. And this is where the wall goes. It's nowhere near finished. People have often said to me, you know, good walls make good neighbours, and I tend to agree with that if the wall is on the boundary. But you can see how it snakes into to Palestine. And then when you put the other restrictions there, that's the pattern you get. And then there's the Israeli settlements. Now this is 2008, and these have been expanded significantly since those, but you get some sense of that. And the settlements are not little groups of tents. They're sizable towns, like Maladamin, just between Bethlehem and Jericho, is a city of between 40 and 50,000 people. So they are significant places of settlement and take up significant land. And the irony is that on this land that Israel has taken, the Israeli military are giving more and more work permits to young Palestinians to work in Israel. And the attraction of that is the salaries are so much higher than what they would be in Palestine that not this academic year, the previous academic year, we had a big drop. All Palestinian universities had a big drop off in the number of young men who came to university because the Israelis opened up a large number of extra permits. So they went straight from school to work because of what they could gather, what they could get paid for that. And the irony is that they are working to do what? To build settlements on Palestinian land. You know, I just find it incredible that as a way of making a living, of being able to survive, Palestinians are helping to lose their own land. And then, in addition to that, there's the Israeli military closed areas, so that you notice along the border with Jordan, Israel controls all of that, so that there's no way that Palestinians can get across there without going through an Israeli checkpoint. So when you put all that together, and the flying checkpoints as well, you get a very restricted area in which Palestinians can operate. Prior to the wall going in, the wall came to Bethlehem in 2005. Prior to that, we had students coming from the north of Jerusalem and from Ramallah and neighbouring cities or towns. Since the wall has gone in, our drawing area has been restricted to East Jerusalem, Bethlehem and Hebron, because, say, coming from Ramallah, you'd have to come through 2 checkpoints each day, and up north even more. So it's restricting the areas from which students can come to Bethlehem University.
So I live near Jerusalem checkpoint, near the wall, and a lot of crashes happen there, and that has impacted my life, my daily life, a lot. When I go to university, I need to make sure that there aren't crashes going on, so the road is safe for me to get to university. That's a challenge that I face every day. Sometimes I take longer roads, and even one time I got stuck between the crashes, and I had no relations with the crashes whatsoever.
Many of our students, like her, have nothing to do with any political or anything, any opposition to the occupation, but get caught up in it because they happen to be there. This is Waleed. He's a young man from Hebron, and he's part of a group called Ambassadors for Bethlehem University, and we have probably 4 or 5 ambassadors meet every visiting group that comes. December 2 years ago, Waleed was with me and another student at lunch with, I think there were 8 people from England. And just casually in passing, he mentioned he'd never seen the sea. They were a bit taken back by that. And then he mentioned he can go to Bethlehem Hall, which is our Faculty of Nursing, and he can look into Jerusalem, but he'd never been allowed to go there. And I think it illustrates the the reality of many of our students and the restrictions under which they have to live. One of the things we are trying to do is to overcome that. And we have a program funded by a group on the west coast of the United States of internships in the United States during the summer. And the summer after Waleed had mentioned this to these English people, he was one of the students that went to the United States. And he went up to Providence, Rhode Island, and was staying with the brothers there. And the first night he'd mentioned to the brothers that he'd not seen the sea. You know. And so one of the brothers put him in the car and took him down to the sea. And the irony of it is, he took him down to a place called Galilee, and he looked across the water to a place called Jerusalem, you know, in Providence, Rhode Island. You know, I just, you know, of all of the places he could see the sea. And when he came back, he rushed up, "Oh, brother, I've seen the sea, I've seen the sea." And I was obviously delighted for him, but also very sad that, you know, at 22 years he'd never seen, and it's only about 20 kilometres from Bethlehem. But I think it highlights the restrictions under which so many of our students live.
It limits the freedom and limits the life. You are merely dead. It limits everything. You do not get to choose what you want to do. You are very, very limited, very restricted. You only live once. I'm a 20-year-old girl. I want to do what I want to do. I want to travel, go to the sea, with my friends to Ramallah, not in 2 hours. I want to be there in 10 minutes. And I can if there were no checkpoints. But this is the life, and this is the reality. We have to deal with it, and still we are living, and we will live through this.
So this is, very briefly, within this context that Bethlehem University operates in the Holy Land. And I think we need to ask the question then, no, before we do that. Bethlehem University arose out of the visit of Pope Paul VI to the Holy Land in 1964, and it opened its doors in 1973, 1st of October, to 112 students. It's a joint venture between the De La Salle brothers and the Vatican. The Vatican provide us with $1.2 million a year for our operating budget, and the brothers provide me and other brothers. There are 12 brothers in the community there this year. So it's a joint venture to do that. There are 3,200 students. Of those, 73% are Muslim and 27% are Christians. 78% of our students are women and 22% men. And some 16,000 graduates. This guy's not a graduate yet. Sort of bored by it. Yeah. We have 5 faculties that enable us to serve the Palestinian people through education, and an Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism. And so it's, we're the smallest of the major universities in Palestine, and this is the limited curriculum that we have. We have to ask, what is an unashamedly Catholic university doing in a country where there's less than 2% of the population Christian? Okay? And I think this is something that we at Bethlehem University have to wrestle with. You know, what are we trying to do there? And when I'm asked that, my response is that if you go back 2,000 years to when Jesus was walking that land, there were no Christians there at all then. So what was he doing? What was he trying to do in engaging with people in the Holy Land at that stage? And if you go to chapter 10 of St. John's Gospel, you'll find he said, I have come, why? I have come that they may have life, life in all its fullness. That's what Jesus was on about. That's what Bethlehem University is on about, whether they're Christians or Muslims or no faith at all. What we are trying to do with these young people is to provide an environment, to provide create an atmosphere and develop an opportunity for them to live life as fully as they possibly can, given the restrictions that they are working under. And this is part of our commitment to serve the Palestinian people through education. And I think it's that sort of sense of bringing life to these young people and therefore keeping hope alive. That's really central to what we are doing. So what's it like to be a student at Bethlehem University? Well, there are several things. There's an opportunity to study. It's in a safe environment, and they're treated with respect. And I think those three things are very important in the way in which we approach what we are doing. But there are the restrictions I've mentioned about. There are visa restrictions on being able to get out of the place. Not many, but a number of our male students in particular, but not only. We have several female students have been arrested by the Israeli military and put in jail. And many of them, when they're in jail, are assaulted. So that's the reality. Now, for some people, or for some of our male students, it's almost a rite of passage to be arrested, to be put in jail. And in some ways they're looked up to for that, but there's always a sneaking suspicion that when they've been in jail they've been turned, and that they are now, because of the pressure that's put on them, are reporting to the Israeli military. There was an incident at Bethlehem University, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a big protest about something Israel had done. And the students gathered in front of Millennium Hall, and one of them burnt an Israeli flag. That was mid-afternoon. By about 4 o'clock, our executive vice president was called by the Israeli military to go to their offices and explain why this happened. So somebody told them, and so I'm under no illusion that the Israelis know what I'm doing and what I'm saying, and so that's just part of the reality that we're living with.
The impacts of the occupation on the last generation is that these kids and teenagers, they were born under the occupation, so all they have seen is a struggle. Most of them have never traveled, have never seen the sea, have never been into Israel, into the holy places, the mosques, all those beautiful places of Bethlehem. Being born and raised in Latin America, I've lived freedom. I've lived what it is to have a normal life, where nobody can tell me where you're going. I can just pack my bag and go to the sea. I can go to another country. It was very shocking for me when I came to Palestine when I was 16 years old, because the wall, it's so real and it's everywhere. You drive for 20 minutes to any direction and you see a wall or a checkpoint. For example, somebody tells you, oh, let's go to a mall, or let's go to this other town that's very close, maybe 15 minutes away, but the first question that comes into your head is there a checkpoint? So all these restrictions that were coming into my mind, and it was very shocking for me at the beginning. But I was lucky enough to have been born abroad, to have seen the difference. So in my mind, I knew that this is wrong, this is not normal. I felt how real the occupation was. But how about the people that have been born here, that have lived here their whole lives, that have no basis of comparison? It's very sad and dangerous at the same time to feel that occupation is normal, because it makes you fight less, or it makes you not see what you could have been living. Some of my classmates that have been into internships through Bethlehem University were shocked. For example, if they went to Europe, they could go into Spain, and next day they're in France, and it's for them it's amazing that they're in one country and they can be in the other without any sort of restrictions or specific papers or anybody stopping them, holding the gun against them.
There's this environment and atmosphere of resistance, Although we are completely victimized, everything here is victimized by occupation, but it's not in the mentality of the people. I've learned from my brothers, my older sisters, that you should live and you should resist, and we cannot be victimized. We are, but you cannot accept it. If you act like it, you will do nothing in your life but sit there, blame occupation, and stop living. And you can't do that.
So it's that sense that the occupation is there, it's a reality, but they're not. She's not using it as an excuse to do nothing. She's going to go on living, and she mentions she's an extraordinary young woman, just amazing. And she mentions at another clip that I'm not using tonight. She mentions that the restrictions are not in here; they're out there, and she's resisting them out there, and I think, and not making excuses or allowing the the occupation to be an excuse for not doing things and not getting on with life. So these young people, when they walk onto our campus, I want them to know that they are safe, and I want them to know that there are people there who really, really care about them. And I talk about that, as has been already mentioned, as an oasis of peace for these young people, as somewhere where it's possible to relax and to know that they are safe. I was extraordinarily pleased, beginning of last year I think it was, there was a Pax Christi gathering at the Bethlehem Hotel, which is just down the road from Bethlehem University. And there was a New Zealand couple there who had been in touch with me and said they'd come up during the conference and just to see me because the conference wasn't going to be very packed. Anyhow, I received an email on the last day of the conference to say that the conference was more packed than they thought, and unfortunately they weren't going to be able to get up to see me. So fine, I was disappointed, but anyhow. And then they checked out of their hotel and found they had about an hour and a half before they were going to be picked up. So they decided to come up to Bethlehem University and try to find me, and they came up and wandered around the campus trying to find me and couldn't. I was out of my office, I can't remember where I was. So they went back to the hotel, and when I came back to my office I was told they'd come. So Dimitri Awad, who is the guest relations officer, and myself went down and spent about 20 minutes with them. And the thing that I found fascinating was that they mentioned that they'd been up to the campus, they'd wandered around trying to find me, and what a peaceful place it was. Mm. Yes. Without having to prod them in any way, that was the experience they had in walking onto our campus. So I was really very, very pleased about that.
I really love the campus. I mean, it's a really beautiful campus. But also, I just loved seeing the way that the students would interact with the teachers and the way that the staff would interact with the students and everybody, like the way they interact with each other. I found like there was a lot of respect, and I really appreciated that. And I felt like there was a community here. And so I decided that Bethlehem University was the right place for me. And I think I really made a really good choice.
Another extraordinary young woman. She graduated 4 years ago now, got a Fulbright scholarship to Washington State University, did so well in her year as a master's under the Fulbright that they gave her a full doctoral scholarship, and she's just over halfway through, absolutely committed to come back and teach at Bethlehem University. She mentioned what she was talking about was checking Bethlehem University out before she came, and then she decided to come. And you remember right at the end when I was talking about movement restrictions, I mentioned the flying checkpoints. And I took her to Washington to a conference I was presenting at there to talk about her experience. And she mentioned there that, we have an entrance exam. So on the day she had her exam, she got up early and then went down, she was in Hebron, went down, got in a shared taxi, and they'd only gone about 10 minutes. And they were stopped at a flying checkpoint. And they sat there for an hour, and then she said, and then I realised they weren't going to let any of us through, but I have an exam at Bethlehem University. So she got out of the taxi and walked, because it wasn't a formal checkpoint, they just had a bar across the road. She walked up to the checkpoint, and the soldiers started shouting at her, and I just kept walking. And I walked towards the other taxi on the other side, and they shouted, and I just kept walking. And I got in a taxi, and then I went to Bethlehem University and I sat my exam. And, there's stories galore about Palestinians being shot for not doing what the soldiers said. But just the way, I just kept walking, And it's that sort of determination, resilience, or however you might like to call it, that I just find incredibly inspiring. And she, I won't go on with other stories about her, but she's just an amazing young woman. So these young men at Bethlehem University are the people that I'm wanting to keep hope alive in. And so, as was mentioned, we talk about ourselves as being a beacon of hope.
to come to Bethlehem University to study at it, to see the different mentalities people have in actually tackling hope. I did not believe in myself before, but when I saw people, and I saw my friends saying, you have to believe in yourself, you have to have hope, actually. Also, my teachers provided me that in a better way, because they also were students of this university. And if they did not believe in themselves or have faith in themselves, they wouldn't have been here. I remember myself as a very different first-year student. First of all, the major itself, it's a great program. The way to analyze, the way to critique, and the way to think and question everything makes it very interesting and strong. So you start questioning everything around you and criticizing it. When you believe in something, you build a belief based on facts. The teachers who have studied abroad also give us hope to go and study abroad. Also being teachers who studied in the university, finished their masters and came back to teach here. That's very motivating for me, you know. I think of myself like I look at my teacher and I think, well, that could be me one day, you know. She was sitting right here. That itself is hope.
I am part of the ambassador program here at BU, and what we do in this program is we welcome guests from all around the world that come to visit our university. A lot of them are big supporters of our university. And what we do is we just talk to them about our experience and the occupation. We show them around campus. And what I like the most about this program is that well, personally, and I think I can speak in general for my classmates as well, is that it gives us hope. When we see people that come into our campus and listen to us, and for once they put away all the biased news that they hear around, and they listen to us and they get in touch with us, and they open their eyes to what's really happening. They are talking to actual Palestinians and they're hearing the other side of their stories. So at that point they can come with their own conclusions, and they can realize that what's happening, it's real, that people are suffering, that people are living under very harsh situations.
So that whole idea of keeping hope alive and the value of people coming from the outside to be with our students is really, really important. But we're also an educational institution. So one of the things at the very heart of that is being a provider of quality higher education. So an oasis of peace, a beacon of hope, and a provider of quality higher education. Then the question arises that I keep asking, is there a better way? And I ask this about everything that happens at Bethlehem University. Is there a better way of cleaning the bottom corridor than hosing it down? I think there might be. Is there a better way of preparing classes? Is there a better way of teaching classes? Is there a better way of assessing? Yes, the answer is always yes. So one of the things we're doing is continually reviewing our curriculum and what we are offering. We've done a major review of our Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism and a major review of our Faculty of Nursing, because we're also looking at providing better facilities. Now, the Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism, back in 2012, we purchased an abandoned hospital. It cost us $13 million, and it's about 6 minutes walk from our present campus. And I had no idea what we were going to use it for when we bought it, but it's the last really usable piece of land close to Bethlehem University. So we bought that, and then we, over the next 2 years almost, we looked at, well, what would we use it for? When we did a review of the Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism, we gathered the main players in the hospitality industry. The hoteliers, the restaurateurs, the travel agents, tour guides, those sort of people. About 50 of them came, and we asked them, well, I asked them, I said to them that, our commitment is to serve the Palestinian people through education. How well are we serving the Palestinian people through the Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism? And they said some nice things, because we are doing some really, really good things there. But what became clear was there's some major gaps in the whole hospitality industry. And so, as our commitment to serve the Palestinian people through education, this was what they asked for. And so we decided to devote this land, to developing a teaching hotel, a teaching restaurant, and to move our institute down to this new property. And then we had to find some money to do it. And so we are an Arab university, we're part of the Arab world, so we started working with various groups in the Arab world, and then 2 years ago we homed in on the Saudi Fund for Development. And last November we got a positive response from them, and I was down in Saudi Arabia 2 weeks before I came south to confirm the thing, and they have given us $10 million to make this, or to convert this abandoned hospital into what we want. The other thing is in terms of the Faculty of Nursing. In Palestine, or in Bethlehem, for people under 26, the unemployment rate is up in the 43%. It just so happens that our Faculty of Nursing, all of our graduates are employed. So there's a huge demand, as it were, to get into the Faculty of Nursing so that, you know, there's almost a guarantee of a job at the end of it. Our acceptance process in August of last year, for this academic year, we had just over 600 applicants for 40 positions. We were struggling, and we were under huge pressure to take more. So we went back and looked at our facilities master plan and decided we would double the intake. So we took 2 cohorts, we took 80 students, knowing that we don't have space for them as they go through. So what we did was we looked at a building that we had, which is a 1-story building, but fortunately when it was built, the foundations were for a 5-story building. So we're going to put another 4 floors on that and then move the Faculty of Nursing into that. The cost of that is $3.7 million. Currently we have 1.5 in the bank, and when I was down in Saudi, I met up with a woman again that I'd met a couple of years ago. So she's going to give me another $1 million, and then there's a foundation we've applied to for $500,000. So that'll bring us up to $3 million. So we need another $700,000. So I'll wait till the end. And then the third thing is that you would appreciate this, that at present, for those visitors that come to Bethlehem University, Dimitri Awad would look around for a spare classroom to gather them in there. Now, I don't know what your experience here in Australia is, but our experience at Bethlehem University is that when students leave a classroom, they don't necessarily leave it nice and tidy for an outside group to come in. And I don't want to sound mercenary, but our visitors become our donors. So we really do have to look after them. So we've decided to build a visitor centre where we can welcome these people and also use it for small conferences and things like that. The other thing I'm embarrassed about is the lack of facilities for athletics and sport. So as a gesture, and I acknowledge it's only a gesture, we're putting a fitness centre in that same building, adjourning it. Now that is only, it's going to cost us $1.8 million, and we already have $1 million of that in hand, so we only need another $800,000. So those are the 3 projects for which we have got money at present. There are 3 other projects which are a little longer term, which we are looking at providing so that we can provide our students with better facilities in which we can provide that higher quality of education. Okay, what I'd like to do just briefly is to talk about the Christians in the Holy Land, because I think there is unfortunately a lot of talk about the Christians in the Holy Land which I don't think is very helpful. And I'll end up this session in a few minutes with a short interview with David Newhouse, and he talks about the importance of language. And I think the language that we use when talking about Christians in the Holy Land is really very, very important. Patriarch Michel Sabah was the first Palestinian to be Patriarch of Jerusalem. And some years ago, this is what he said. He's been to the Brothers' place and celebrated Mass for us several times, and I just find him an incredibly prophetic sort of person. And one of the things he's on about is fear and despair, of trying to prevent people to be overwhelmed by fear and dropping into despair. And I think there is cause to be afraid. I don't want to pretend that there's not. The Arab Spring, for example, turned into a brutal struggle for power. There were thousands of people driven from their homes, and Christians were driven from places where they'd been from the beginning. You know, I acknowledge that. That's factual. But fear leads to people talking about the persecution of Christians. And I think this is an unfortunate way of talking about the damage that's being done to Christians, the way they're suffering. I think once we start talking about the persecution of Christians, there is a very real danger of isolating ourselves, of circling the wagons, of putting up walls and separating ourselves from other people. The truth is that secular Muslims, as defined in all sorts of ways, are attacked and murdered. Okay? The first victims of extremists are the Muslims. There are many, many, many more Muslims have been killed than Christians. So what do we need to do? Well, Christians and Muslims, I think, need to stand together against the new forces of extremism and destruction. I know this is a complicated area, but I think, you know, I hear it so often about the persecution of Christians. I'm not talking about the suffering of Christians. I'm not talking about that sort of thing. But when we talk about the persecution of Christians, I think it undermines what I think we should be doing. We need to face fear and understand it. I think it's unwise not to be conscious of that. But irrational fear does not discriminate. And what I mean by that is irrational fear says that all Muslims are dangerous. We don't want to have anything to do with Muslims. And that is blatantly not true. You know, the students that we have at Bethlehem University, the lecturers and people on the staff that we have, incredible Muslim people. And so, you know, irrational fear doesn't help us there. But we need to study each situation. So what's Bethlehem University doing to face this situation? Yeah, remember, this is a Muslim girl.
It's really important to preserve the Palestinian Christian community that exists here because it's an integral part of Palestine. It's an integral part of what it means to be Palestinian. The Palestinian Christian community is now only 2% rather than the 20 or even more percent that it was. I think that's really unacceptable. We're losing a part of the Palestinian identity by losing that community.
So to have a Muslim girl, she's not unique in that. There are others who take exactly the same position. That is part of what it means to be Palestinian is to be engaged with Christians and Muslims. And these young people, what we are trying to do, we are, as I mentioned, a joint venture of the De La Salle brothers. So the Lassallean approach to things is built upon building relationships. I keep hammering and hammering with the faculty and staff that we need to be brothers and sisters to one another, and we need to be older brothers and sisters to the young people entrusted to us. You know, and I think this is increasingly becoming apparent in the way, you know, what Lubna said about when she watched what was happening and the relationship between teachers and students.
I come from a Muslim family, and it's kind of conservative family, and I think that does affect the way I live. But I still feel very comfortable here. I don't feel that I am being threatened or that my identity as a Muslim is kind of in danger. Being in a Christian school like Bethlehem University, I grew up in Hebron. The majority of citizens are Muslim, so I didn't get to come close or come across Christians in back in my city. When I first came to Bethlehem University, I started to get closer to Christians. I know that they're Palestinians sharing a lot in common. So it was a positive experience, coming here and meeting with Christians, getting closer to them, knowing more about them and about their religions, about their culture as, you know, Palestinian people. I think Bethlehem University sets a very good example of an environment in which people from different religious and cultural backgrounds be together and genuinely accept and approve each other and try to learn and work together toward the common goals that we share, which is mainly about building a better future for us as people and for Palestine as a state.
He graduated last year, and he laughs about the time before he came, after he'd left school, in trying to decide where he wanted to go, because he wanted, with all humility and objectiveness, our Faculty of Business is by far the best in Palestine, and so he wanted to come to the Faculty of Business, but it was at a Christian university. But he wanted to come to the Faculty because he'd heard all these strange things about the Christians, and he wasn't sure that this is where he wanted to be. But anyhow, the business won out, obviously. And he laughs about the fact that, he wasn't frightened, but he was sort of wondering what he was getting into, and he got there. And as he sort of mentioned, he elaborates elsewhere, he said, what he was surprised was, they were Palestinians, just like himself. And then in the last, about a year and a half, his best friend was a Christian. And my argument is, if we can get more Muslims with that appreciation of Christians, then the context within which Christians are going to be living is going to be much more supportive. He, like many of our students from Hebron, as he mentioned, have never met a Christian until they came to Bethlehem University. So I think that bringing people together like that is a significant way in which we are supporting and enabling Palestine to be more accepting of one another. So we need to speak out of truth and freedom, and to be able to learn together. This is him again.
One sense of belonging to Bethlehem University community. I think everyone here blends in under the roof of the school. We're connected through our desire to learn, to study, and to enjoy life in general. However, blending in does not mean that one's religious identity has to dissimulate. It's just that you have to learn how to be considerate and open to those who come from different faith or perspective.
So we want to preserve the Palestinian culture that's there. And
hello, I'm from Bethlehem. I come from a Christian family. In my city, Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born, we all live together. Even if we don't have the same religion, but we share the same culture, traditions, and values. And what is special about Bethlehem University is that we all live together as a big family, and most importantly, we all treat each other as human beings. And as a Christian woman, I believe that it is my duty to treat others in ways full of love and respect. And even though sometimes we have the fear of what's going on in the Middle East, I always pray to continue to coexist together in peace and respect, and to always have a mature and open mind.
And it's that developing an open mind that is very much at the heart of what we are seeking to do in bringing these people together. So, there's a need for a national dialogue based on a shared vision of society and to build a common future together. Now, I'd just like to finish this section with this short interview with David Newhouse. David is a Jew from South Africa who was sent at 15 years old to Jerusalem by his parents to deepen his Jewish roots. He acknowledges that he was an atheistic Jew, who didn't believe in this God stuff, but he was a cultural Jew. And he was in a boarding school in Jerusalem. And then he was fascinated by Russian history. And he heard that there was a Russian Orthodox nun in a monastery up on the Mount of Olives. So one day he snuck out of boarding school and found her, and was fascinated by what she told him, because she knew people that he had studied, and she was able to talk about it to him. But she was in her 90s, she was bedridden, she was paralyzed, and as he came away from that, he just couldn't reconcile what he had experienced because he'd never met such a joyful person. And how could she be so joyful when she was paralysed and bedridden? And he struggled with that. And so a week or so later he went back and he said to her, I don't want to talk about history, I want to talk about you. Why are you so joyful? And she said, I am in love. And he said, oh, it is a whacker. And then he said she was very discreet because she was conscious he was a young Jewish boy. He said to him, well, I'm in love with Jesus. And she started talking about her experience of and her relationship with Jesus. And he just went away from there gobsmacked by the whole thing. And then some months later he met up with an Irish Josephite sister and began talking to her, and then decided he wanted to become a Catholic. And then he had to go back to South Africa and tell his parents. And of course his parents were really upset, and they said to him, well, how could you possibly think of doing that, given what they've done to us? And he said, well, never even thought of that. And so anyhow, he promised that he would not do anything for 10 years. So 10 years went by, and when he was 25, he went back to them and said, I want to become a Catholic. So they kept their side of the bargain, and so he became a Catholic. And then some years later, he decided he wanted to become a Jesuit. And so he went to the Jesuits, and the Jesuits said, no. 9 years you have to wait. So he waited 9 years, and then in 2000, he was ordained a Jesuit priest. And now he's the patriarchal vicar for the Hebrew-speaking Christians in Jerusalem. He's a personal friend of mine. There's 6 of us, and he's one of them. We go on retreat each year up in Abu Ghosh. And he's just an extraordinary person and an incredible way of articulating what is happening there. And he's talking about what is the mission of the church in this sort of area.
What do you see as the mission of the church here?
Christians are, whether it's in the Holy Land or throughout the neighboring countries. And that means that many Christians are living in fear. Fear means, in human terms, putting up walls, trying to feel safe. That can also mean, of course, migrating, leaving, to find safer places. And those that remain want to live in a Christian world, create some kind of safe Christian world. I think that the mission of the church is to counter that. First of all, to say fear is not a good teacher. Of course, we cannot totally dismiss fear. That would be foolish, and we are called to be wise. But we must not give in to fear. And then I would say that the mission certainly touches on 2 extremely important issues. One is, we have no power in this situation. We don't have political power, financial power, or almost any kind of viable influence to change reality. But we do have something that is extremely powerful, and that is the word. The word we speak. The discourse we use in order to talk about the general situation, who we are, who everyone else is, and what we see as the possibilities of newness breaking in. Christian language. I think that here when we speak about evangelization in our context, it means speaking unashamedly as Christians, disciples of Jesus in this very difficult situation. Which means that not only are certain words forbidden, we can't call anybody enemy. That's not to say that we're stupid and we don't recognize where evil is, where injustice is, but enemy is a word that we don't use. We are driven by a dynamic of love as Christians. What does that mean? In very real, practical terms in our day-to-day lives, what does that mean when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to Jews? When it comes to all those around us, that if we were simply driven by nature, we would fear them. We might even hate them. We might even seek to totally disassociate ourselves from them. How do we talk about them? How do we talk about what is possible in this land? Intimately associated with the question of what language do we speak, is the question of our Christian institutions. Our future is intimately connected with those institutions we have historically built, those institutions we are building, and these institutions incarnate our language. What am I speaking about specifically? Our schools, our hospitals, our clinics, our social work outreaches. And we notice something which is very important when we look around this country. In our schools, everyone is welcome. In our hospitals, everyone is treated. Now this everyone is the evangelical everyone. When we set up church, we pull the walls down because we want to go out, as Jesus was always going out. And in a time when that is threatening, when people will say, that's dangerous, stay at home, put up tall walls, close the doors, close the windows, the church's mission is to do exactly the contrary. To go out and look in the society for those who share our vision, who are threatened by those who threaten us, so that we can work together and open up the society to what is possible, even though it seems impossible right now.
I think it sort of captures for me what Bethlehem University is trying. I'm really disappointed he didn't mention schools, but he should have mentioned Bethlehem University as well. But anyhow, I think the general thrust of what he's on about is captured in this, that at a time when fear is so obvious in the Middle East, Bethlehem University stands as a Christian presence highlighting faith as an antidote to that fear. And I think that is really a central part of what we are doing at Bethlehem University. And I just noticed last week or the week before that Pope Francis, in speaking to the Congregation for Education, made this comment, that universities make a great contribution to the mission of the Church when they are at the service of growth in humanity, dialogue, and hope. And I think those are the three things that Bethlehem University is committed to in trying to enable students to live life as fully as they can, and to become as fully human as they can, to engage in dialogue and then
broken town of Bethlehem, your people long for peace, but curfews, raids and closure barricades have brought them to their knees. Still they strive for justice, still they make their stand. Their hopes and fears still echo down the years. Come heal this holy land, heal this holy land. Holy Child of Bethlehem, royal refugee, your place of birth is now a hell on earth through our complicity. The innocent still suffer, their backs against the wall. We see the curse, the violence and worse, and choose to ignore it all. Choose to ignore it.